Hi, everyone. I'm Erin Blue, Executive Director of the Peggy R. McConnell Arts Center in Worthington. I'm delighted to be here again tonight as a partner with Ohioana for their festival this year. We've had this relationship for the last few years, and we've always enjoyed having people join us in our building for these events. So again, normally you'd be here with us in the facility at the MAC in Worthington, but we're still really glad to be part of the festival as this virtual event continues this year. I'm also happy to introduce this evening's panelists as well as the moderator. Courtney Brown is with the Ohioana Library Association. She is the librarian for the Library Association, has been there for 4 years. And all of our panelists this evening are residents of Worthington, so I'm thrilled to get to know them a little bit better tonight with all of you. Karin earned her bachelor's degree in hospitality and tourism management from Purdue University and served as an event planner for 2 Big Ten universities and various nonprofits over 8 years before becoming a stay-at-home mom. She enjoys chocolate-covered peanuts, uninterrupted sleep, and sitting with other people. In Worthington with her husband, daughter, son, cat, and dog. King's 100 is her first novel. Lucy Snyder is Shirley Jackson Award nominated, 5-time Bram Stoker Award winning author of 14 books and over 100 published short stories. Her most recent books are the collection Halloween Season and the forthcoming novel, The Girl with the Star-Stained Soul. Her writing has appeared in publications such as Asimov's Science Fiction, Apex Magazine, Nightmare Magazine, Pseudopod, Strange Horizons, and Best Horror of the Year. You can learn more about her at lucysnyder.com. Follow her on Twitter at Lucy A. Snyder. Dan Stout, also a Worthington resident, where he writes noir with a twist of magic and a disco chaser. His prize-winning fiction draws on his travels throughout Europe, Asia, and the Pacific Rim, as well as an employment history spanning everything from subpoena server to assistant well driller. Dan's stories have appeared in publications such as the Saturday Evening Post, Nature, and Mad Scientist Journal. Titan Song is the 3rd volume in the Carter Archives from DAW Books. You can follow him on Facebook or your social media site of choice. Thanks, everyone, and looking forward to a great panel tonight.
Thank you, Erin, for that wonderful introduction. We are really happy to be back here with the McConnell Arts Center. We've been happy to be partnering with them for several years. Like Erin said, normally we would be there in person, so but it's great to be able to see everyone tonight. So we're going to go ahead and start our panel, and this panel actually has a little bit more specific. We were talking to everybody's from Worthington, but we're also going to be talking about speculative fiction tonight. So that was one thing. I actually got a question earlier today from someone who asked me, what is speculative fiction? So I'm going to go ahead. I have a definition of that, and I would like to ask you all a little question about that after this. So dictionary.com defines speculative fiction as fiction that encompasses works in which the setting is other than the real world, involving supernatural, futuristic, or other imagined elements. So my question is, and the person who asked me this question, hi, Rick, is a librarian, he wanted to know if this was something that you all sort of, do you like this term, or do you feel it is a pretentious term that sort of people are using because they don't want to call you genre writers? That was the question. Anyone feel free to answer.
I'm fine with it personally. And I think that using speculative fiction as a term that encompasses science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and other forms of weird fiction distinguishes it from other genre fiction like romance and mystery, because, you know, calling somebody a genre writer, I mean, that covers way more than speculative fiction. So that's my take on it.
Any other thoughts? You don't have to. I had tended to agree. It just seems like it's much easier to say than, you know, to just list everything that everyone is, you know, that all of your books are. So along those lines, I was just wondering, when you go to, and I'll direct this one to Dan first, when you go to sell a book, how do you sort of describe it? Is there a certain way that you have a query? Because, you know, when you sit down and read your books, it's a sci-fi, noir, magic, disco, you know. How did you describe that to the publishers in order to get it sold?
We really leaned into that idea of blending different genres and that it was fun. We said it's a world where sorcerers wear the best designer labels and 8-track cassettes are state of the art. And that sort of sets the tone in terms of the technology, a little bit of the humor and the detective feel of the series. Another way to do it is to use what's called comp titles, and that's saying it's like this meets that. So we used to say that this is like Men in Black meets Chinatown. So you get that fantasy element or the speculative fiction element, plus the sort of hard-boiled noir element as well.
I did see that a lot for Karin. I saw a lot of folks online describing your book as American Idol meets The Selection.
American Idol, that's a new one. Yeah, I've gotten Glee, High School Musical, but American Idol, I like that one.
So how did you, I'll direct this one to you first. So considering that you have, like, all of you have these series and everything, and this world building that you're doing, how do you keep it straight in your head what everything is, and each of the kingdoms and all of the characters and things like that? Do you do spreadsheets, or do you just sort of go with it? How do you do it?
So I started with a spreadsheet and I just confused myself in Excel. It just became too much for me. I'm definitely more of a right brain person than a left brain person. So that was a little much, but I do have notebooks. I actually have a notebook here. I'm never without a pretty notebook to keep notes jotted down in. So it's a little old fashioned for me, but that helps me with certain details of kingdoms. And I only had 2 kingdoms really in my book that were the major players. So that was a little easier too, is, well, there's 2 kingdoms and they're pretty much opposite from each other. So that was my organization, I guess, which wasn't that great.
I guess, oh, sorry, that was. I sort of picture Dan with one of those conspiracy board things, with the way that yours would just have mana in the middle of it, and everything sort of goes out from that. How do you keep track of that sort of thing? Because you have, yours is fascinating to me because you have like the pop culture of this place and you know, just holidays and things like that. So would you like to talk about that a little?
Yeah, I'll steal part of Karen's answer in that I always have at least one notebook on hand too. I have mine with me, within reach all the time too. And then for each book, I take a 3-ring binder and I fill it up with those little clear divider pockets, and I load it up and I do custom artwork on it, and then I shellac like crazy all over it so it looks like an old school Trapper Keeper.
Wow.
With that kind of gloss cover and like weird retro art. And so it makes me happy every time I pick it up and play with it. And then over the course of time, I move all that stuff into a piece of software specifically for writing and working in large projects called Scrivener. And I have a Scrivener file for each novel. And then I also have one that's just for the world building so that I can kind of hop through things, and it's all hyperlinked, so I can jump from one type of species or one type of music or entertainment and jump to another genre.
Lucy, how do you do it? I know you have several series yourself.
I keep it in my head, maybe.
Pretty amazing.
No, I mostly take notes in Word. I've got Scrivener, but haven't made good use of it quite yet. I've also got some mind mapping software that I'm going to kind of play around with. If I come back to the Jesse Shimmer novels, like I've got 3 books and I realized I need some kind of a concordance for everything that's happened in them. And that would be the project where it would be like the most important. But for the novels that I've had so far, the others have been, one-offs. So it's just basically I kind of keep notes for myself as I'm writing the book. If I'm writing a sequel to a short story, generally the same thing. I'll just take some notes in Word, but I probably need to use something a little bit more elegant going forward.
And now, when you do make all these things, do you have to make copies of them for your editors, just so they know? Just,
I haven't so far. I mean, generally they'll just ask questions and I'll answer them.
Yep, same here. They ask questions, but they don't necessarily even want to see all that world building stuff,
Mhm.
because when they read the book, they want to be approaching it in the same way that a reader would. So they
that
don't
makes
want
sense.
additional knowledge.
Interesting. So we spoke a little, Lucy, you were speaking a little about your short stories. I was wondering, and Dan, I know you've written some too. Unless you've been, commissioned to write a short story, if you're just sitting down to write something, when do you know if this is a short story or it's a novel?
That's a learned skill and I don't know how to teach it to somebody else. Generally, I would say 90% of what I write, it's because I've been invited to write for an anthology or to submit to a magazine or something like that. Generally, like 80% of the time, if I sit down with like a word count in my mind, what my process is that I'll think about a story idea for quite a while before I actually sit down to write it. So I think in that, sort of pre-writing, mulling it over process, I kind of figure out in my own head, like, okay, this is an idea that will take about this many words to execute. That said, there have been a couple of instances where I finished a short story and thought, you know what, there was a lot more to that. I mean, I reached an ending for this particular plot, but there's more to this world. And so I've gone back and expanded some things later on. Most of the time I do pretty well with that, but there have been a couple of instances where I had to contact an editor. It's like, hey, I know you asked for 5,000 words, but it's 10,000 words. Is that okay? And, generally it has been, so it's worked out. But yeah.
Wonderful. Dan, is it the same for you?
Largely, I used to be part of a online forum called Liberty Hall, and every week they did a prompt, and you'd hit a button, and it would start a 90-minute timer, and they would give you a prompt. You'd have 90 minutes to write a short story, and then it was posted to this group, and everybody who was a member would read each other's anonymous stories and give a critique. So every week we all wrote a short story in 90 minutes, and that time limit is so compressed that it took away the pressure to be good. You just had to try, and everybody was encouraging, and it was a great community. And in fact, the my debut novel, Titan Shade, started as one of those challenges that I wrote in 90 minutes. I came up with the first chapter, a little less than the first chapter, and then the response was good. And I kind of, like Lucy said, I don't know how to describe it, but I knew there was a lot of meat there, and there was really something I could pursue. So that's kind of where that came from.
Now, are you all involved in writers groups? Karin, do you have one?
No, I don't have a writing group per se, but I do have a really great critique group. And lucky for me, they're all in my family. I know people say don't pick family members, but I just happen to have a really talented extended family. And so I really enjoy having them to give me feedback on my manuscripts. I completed a new manuscript last year, and then after their feedback realized, okay, this is going to take a little bit more work, because I was hoping to have another book completed by last year. And that didn't happen, but it's historical fiction. So now I'm getting a little deeper into research, and it's forced me to take a little more time to look at it a little deeper. So yeah, not an active writing group necessarily, but definitely a great critique group.
And Lucy, I know you actually teach writing, but do you have a group as well? Or
I was a member of Write Shop several years back, but they were just too productive. Like I couldn't keep up with what everybody was writing. And, I just felt like, I'm not able to give you guys the comments that you deserve. So I'm just going to step out. What I have now are a couple of first readers, one of whom is exclusively a reader, and another of whom is another writer. And he and I trade work back and forth. And that's worked out pretty well. And of course, Gary Braunbeck, my husband, I trade work with him as well.
it's hard to ask you that.
That helps.
Must be have someone living in the house that
Yes, definitely.
So I have a couple of questions that are more specific to each of you. So I'll go through some of those and then we'll go back. And then if anybody's watching, go ahead and type anything in the chat that you would like, and we will get to your questions. So I just want to say that. So Karin, can you tell me a little bit, when you started writing your novel, did you know it was going to be YA at first, or was that really what you were interested in writing?
Yes, I was always interested in writing YA because that's what I read. I was a huge fan of YA before even writing it, which I think has helped as far as just marketing and reaching out on social media. I was off social media for the majority of the time that I was actively writing. And then once I got close to finishing and querying, I jumped back onto social media, and boy, how things can change just after a few years. So yeah, I'm on the TikTok now too. So as a YA author, I feel like I have to figure all these things out to connect with my audience. But yeah, I'm a YA fan, and it's been fun to be on the other side of it now.
And your fans name themselves? I think I saw that.
Do my fans?
Yeah.
Well, I did have a group of people called my court members because this is a performance court. So that was fun. They helped me with promotion and things like that.
Yeah, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
That was very interesting. So yeah, we were talking right before we signed on, and you were telling us a little bit you were a singer. So obviously you incorporated that a lot into the book. Did you want to maybe tell us how you got the idea for this book?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been singing my whole life. It just as a fun hobby to do. I was in choir as a kid, show choir, Beaver Creek Friends show choir, go Beavers. And then in college, I was also in a performance group that was all women. And I just had a great time. It was an extracurricular activity aside from my studies. And they really treated it like it was an athletic group. We rehearsed every day as if we were a singing team. We were on the road performing. We would do performances for the university, for president's events. So we were more than just singers. We were also expected to be ambassadors for the university. And we had to learn etiquette. We had to know, history of our university, mingle with guests. And the way that I decided to write a book about my experience in these performing groups is I just had a dream one night, and I just saw this image of a girl on stage, and it just felt really powerful to me. And I kept mulling it over. Oh, okay, well, should I, take it this mystery route? Should I have magic, real magic incorporated? And then my husband, who I actually met in that group, he was our male drummer. So one male drummer to 40 singing women. I guess the odds were in his favor to marry one of us. But I was the lucky one who got to marry him. And so I just tried to pull from real life experiences, and the main love interest in my book happens to be a drummer. So there you go.
Well, that's okay. It's what you know sometimes. Sorry, that's complete. So do you have plans for a sequel to this one, or did you just kind of intend it as a standalone? I could see it going both ways from the ending.
Yeah, I would love to write a sequel, and I had my second baby last June during the pandemic, so it's been a little rough finding
Wow.
significant amounts of writing time. I also have, I mentioned earlier, that historical fiction that I would love to finish, and so yeah, it might take a while, but I would love to continue the series.
Wonderful. So Dan, I wanted to ask you kind of the same thing. You're a trilogy now. This one just came out last week, which congratulations. So do you intend on continuing, or
Yeah,
will it
absolutely.
be kind of a trilogy?
No, I have a lot of stories that I like to tell with these characters in this world. And I just have so much fun playing with it and playing with a kind of weird juxtaposition of the
Right.
detective story and disco and rock and roll and an oasis of warmth in the middle of a nice field and all these things that are just weird and strange when you put them together. And they just make for a lot of fun. Um, that said, I am taking a break right now and working on another project because even as much as I love those books, eventually you feel like you're doing the same exercise over and over, and you need to sort of step away and stretch and do something else. So I'm working on something a little bit shorter right now that's a really great palate cleanser. And it's going to let me hopefully just kind of refocus and dive back in when I'm ready to.
Wonderful. And since we were talking about music a little bit, do you happen to have like a playlist or something that puts you like in the world of Titan Jade in the part
Oh
of?
yeah. I have a Spotify playlist for each book.
Oh, nice.
And I
Okay.
make them public so people can go on there and kind of get a feel for them. So there's lots of funk and classic rock and like real kind of down and dirty R&B interspersed with classic disco from the 70s. And it's glorious and chaotic. I love
That
it.
sounds perfect. I love it. Um, so I wanted to ask you guys, Lucy, sorry, I have one for you as well. You have a poetry book coming out, is that right?
Yes, I do.
Have you written a lot of poetry?
I've written a fair bit. I've written more in recent years. The poetry collection is called Exposed Nerves, and it'll be out sometime in the fall. We haven't nailed down an exact publishing date. But I started up a Patreon a couple of years ago, and I thought to myself, okay, how can I make this work in my favor? Like, is there a particular type of writing that I haven't been doing that I really feel like I want to do more of? And I thought, you know what, I haven't been writing so much poetry lately. So I set up one of the tiers on there is like people get, a new poem every so often. And so the vast majority of what's in the forthcoming book was actually created first for my Patreon followers. And, it kind of built from there.
Amazing. And you did do a Kickstarter to publish as well, right?
I've done a couple of Kickstarters, mostly I've been affiliated with them for like anthologies. But it seems like anymore about half the anthologies I'm involved with go the crowdfunding route just because it works really, really well.
Right. That's interesting. So are you all sort of, I know you published with multiple presses. Do you prefer like smaller presses?
Well, sometimes with a smaller press, if you're doing, for instance, short story collections or poetry collections, I mean, you are going to be working with a smaller mid-size press unless you've been out in the world like winning Pulitzer Prizes or something. I much prefer to work with larger presses for novels just because with the larger press, they can really get out and push the book. You get into bookstores, things like that. The advantage of working with smaller mid-sized presses is it's a lot more collaborative. Whatever aspect of the book that you'd like control over, generally the publisher is perfectly willing to let you take point on that. If you have opinions about the cover, you want to work with a particular artist, that can happen much more easily. If you have like strong opinions about typography, usually the publisher is perfectly willing to listen. Whereas with a very large publisher, I mean, they'll listen, but ultimately they'll do what they think is right, which, that's their job. So.
Right. And Karin, did you enjoy your experience? I was not familiar with the publisher that you used, but it is a small press, right?
Yes, Immortal Works Press is a small press, and like I mentioned earlier, I did query agents for about 6 months. I got over 100 rejections from agents. And with a few of these small presses, you can submit without agent representation. So I just went ahead and tried it, and I was lucky that they accepted my manuscript. And yeah, it's very much like a boutique feel. It's more hands-on with them. So I had a lot of say in my cover design. Not much changed as far as plot in my book. There were a couple things here or there that I had an editor help me out with, but really, yeah, like Lucy mentioned, the publisher, the big house publisher can take your book and kind of mold it into more of what they expect from it than what you had in your mind for, the previous 5 years, your book baby that you've been dreaming about, that they might get their hands on and change it up a little bit. But yeah, so far it's been great, and they are a growing press. So they're getting so many new authors every year. I don't have the number of what that is, but they are clean fiction, and I've read a bunch of the books. They're a lot of fun, YA and adult.
Dan, yours is bigger, but DAW is pretty big, right? But you had some say in the covers in this, right? Who is your cover artist for your books?
Chris McGrath. And Daw is part of Penguin Random House,
I thought
but
they were.
I'm really lucky because they're wholly owned and they're outside of Penguin Random House.
Right.
So my editor, Sheila Gilbert, is also one of the owners of Daw. So when I pitched her on the cover and what the design and the artist and all that sort of stuff, I made my case and here's why it made sense. And she said, oh yeah, that makes sense. And a few days later, I heard from the cover artist and he said, let's go. And we just started kicking around ideas and stuff like that. So I'm really, really lucky. I've heard horror stories from other artists or other writers who have zero input. I've really blessed to have an experience much closer to what Karin and Lucy described with smaller presses. So I couldn't be happier.
We do have a few audience questions. I'm going to go ahead and go into those before I get anything more online. So, okay. Jenny Garwood asks, how do you gather ideas and choose which ones to write? So, anybody would like to?
So for me, I have so many ideas, and I know that's a problem that a lot of authors share, but the one that I try to stick to the ones that I just can't stop thinking about. Like, they keep me up at night and they won't let me go to sleep until I write a little bit of it down. Also the ones that I presume to not take as much time, which my historical fiction has totally turned me upside down on that, because it's taken a lot of extra time that I didn't expect, but I enjoy it. And so I think, if you're getting into writing and you yourself have a lot of ideas, I would say just the one that, even if it takes you, 1 to 3 to 5 years to finally finish, that you're enjoying that process and you're enjoying that idea throughout it.
Yeah, I would agree with Karin. If it's an idea that really speaks to you, that you can't, keeps rolling around in your head and you keep coming back to it, by all means, write that one, work with it. Beyond that, for me, I get ideas from dreams. I get ideas from, just random stuff. A lot of times the anthologies that I'll be invited to write for are themed. For instance, I'll be writing a story for Classic Monsters anthology that'll be coming out later this year. And when I get an invitation like that, I try to think, okay, what are the most obvious things that people will be writing about, and how can I approach that kind of slant ways? How can I do something that's a little bit different, that's maybe not something that readers would expect, but isn't so far in the weeds that they'll be like, how is this even connected to the theme? But yeah, what Karin said, definitely, if it's in your mind, if it's in your heart, definitely write about it.
You have anything to add, Dan?
No, I just agree with what's already been said. We mentioned keeping notebooks, and I save all of my notebooks, and I have an entire bookshelf of nothing but notebooks with ideas and things that I've seen in the newspaper, cut out and pasted in. And they're little, expressions of my brain at that 6-month period or whatever. And every now and then I just sort of stroll through them and I go through and I see if anything jumps out at me. So kind of keeping notes and looking for those weird juxtapositions that kind of resonate with you in one way or another.
Very cool. This looks like it's for everyone. What advice would you have for an aspiring author, either on the writing or business side of your job? Does anybody want to tackle that?
On the writing side, my best advice is read widely, read in and out of your chosen genre. Keep reading, but also, keep writing. You don't necessarily have to write every day, but keep at it, keep working. You're going to get a lot of rejections at the front end. If you're a short story writer, probably your first 10 professional short story sales are going to be a lot more difficult than the following 50. There's kind of a hump that you have to get over. And once you get past it, you sort of graduate to a better grade of problem. The problems don't go away, but they become more interesting at least. But yeah, it's basically just don't give up, keep at it.
Yeah, and everyone, we're all so busy, and that's a question I get a lot because I don't have time to write the novel that I want to write. What do I do? How do you ever find time to do something like that? And I like to say that even thinking time is writing time, because you're developing this world in your head. You're developing these characters. You're connecting with them, and you have to know them inside and out. You have to know how they'll react to any situation. And so definitely don't stop writing, but also don't start thinking and dreaming and imagining, because we're all just in the fiction world, we're just playing pretend pretty much on paper. And so you just have to do it well enough that you can convince other people to believe what's in your head.
I think the only piece of advice I would have would kind of apply to both the writing and the business side, which is to find ways to refill the sponge or refill the well, whatever you need to do to recharge, both personally and creatively. So that's whether that's reading, watching a movie, going for a long walk by yourself, just kind of unplugging from the internet and news for a little bit, and then forgive yourself if you have a goal to write a short story and you don't have a deadline that's due with an editor. Tell yourself that's okay. Don't forget to find the joy in the work, and just keep coming back to it.
Yeah, turn off the TV too. We watch a lot of TV nowadays. So take a break from Netflix.
That's good advice. Rebecca Prinzhorn would like to ask Karin, how do you make sure your teenage characters talk like teenagers and not like adults?
Oh, well, I cheat a little bit, which is I've put this many years in the future, so it's not contemporary, which is great because I have no idea what the slang is these days. I'm on TikTok, so I know a little bit, but oh my gosh, I would have to probably do a whole year of research if I were to write contemporary YA to get it right. But yeah, so I think part of it is just what I think feels right to those teenagers in their own world. And then also going back to my teenage years, what did we talk about? How did we act? How were we annoying to each other and to the adults in the room? So lucky for me, it's in a world that's not now. So
that does help.
yes.
Jenny also asked, what is one of your goals or dreams as an author? I guess for everyone.
One thing that I found really useful to do is I made a career bingo board, which is just in Excel. It's a grid. And every time I think of something like, oh, this would be cool to go do this. And it might be earn X dollars as a self-pub author that month, or it might be appear in this magazine, or run into a stranger who's read one of my books, who has, they don't know who I am and I don't know who they are. And I put all of those things on that bingo board. And whenever I hit one of them, I color it in. And that reminds me both that there's always so much more to do that I haven't hit yet. And it also lets me take a moment to look at all those squares that I've filled in and appreciate how far I've come.
That sounds so cool.
That's very cool.
I feel like we need to see a picture of that on social media or something.
Yeah, that would be cool. Oh, someone else asked, what is your favorite ways to connect with fans?
Well, I've talked about social media, so I do love social media, especially those moments that surprise you where someone just reaches out to you out of the blue to say, oh, I just really enjoyed your book, or, finding a nice review that you didn't expect on Goodreads. That's always nice too. But I'm actually looking forward to when we can meet in person again, because 2020 was my debut year, and to debut during a time when no one's getting together, I still had a lot of fun virtually. We had a really great time for my launch event on Instagram, but the moment that I'm looking forward to is when I get to go in person to an event, someone walks up to my table with my book in their hands and I get to sign it. I've done that for my mom and dad, but it's going to feel extra special when it's, a reader who I've never met before.
Yeah, that must have been really tough to have a debut during this time. I can't imagine that. It's still exciting, but was it a little disappointing as well? And
It was, but I also
at the same time, so
right. That was probably even harder and still is learning how to adjust as a family of 4 now. So yeah, virtually I was actually expecting that because of the baby. And I was hoping that by the spring I'd be able to start getting out and meeting people, but we're still doing it virtually and it's still fun, but it just makes that, looking forward to that in-person date even that much more special.
Yeah, I really miss in-person events. Like I would have great conversations with people at Ohioana or the Origins convention here in town, things like that. Like in a normal year, I would do 12 to 16 events a year, maybe one a month. And, when the pandemic hit and everything stopped, it was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with myself? Since then, I've mostly been connecting with people on Twitter and Facebook. And some other random online events. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the in-person stuff.
I think somebody actually has their hand up, so I'm gonna go over here and see who wants to ask a question. John Hoffman, go ahead and ask your question if you like. This is the first time I've done that. Go ahead, John. Can't hear him. You're still on there. Try again if you want to. We'll see if we can get back to that. That's the first time that's ever happened to me. Or you can go ahead and type it in the chat if you want to do that. I'll show you how to do that. There we go. We'll just try that. Sorry for that little technical thing there. So since we are talking about the pandemic for a second, we don't have to talk about it for too long. I'm sure everybody's a little sick of hearing about it. Lucy, I just wanted to ask, are you getting a lot of hits on amygdala, your story?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's come up several times over the past year and a little bit. Yeah, people, that's resonated with a lot of readers.
Is there somewhere that people can read that online, or is that?
Yeah, they can read Amygdala online for free at Nightmare Magazine.
Right.
I can look up the URL real quick and post it into chat if you want to share that out to people.
That'd be great.
Okay.
I figured people might want to read that. We won't give away too much about the story, but it does feel a little relevant right now. So I just have some other, we'll see if some other questions pop up. Please feel free to ask questions, but I'll just ask some general ones while we're waiting for folks. I noticed all 3 of you have written quite a bit in first person. I was just wondering, how do you pick which point of view to write from? Then anybody, go ahead.
It feels comfortable to me. I've tried writing in third person and I don't know, it just didn't jive with my writing style. So first person just felt natural for me.
Since I'm writing a kind of a noir detective story, that's got a long tradition of first person narration. So I kind of leaned into that to kind of help capture that feel.
Lucy, I know you don't always, but how do you pick? Just go with what feels right.
Was that question directed to me?
Or yeah, just sorry.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't hear you. Yeah, I write a fair bit in first person. I tend to use close third person, but I've even successfully sold a couple of stories written in second person, which you're, technically not supposed to do
Yeah.
outside of a choose your own adventure story. But yeah, I had an interesting story with regard to my Spellbound trilogy. I'd originally written that in third person, and my editor had me rewrite Spellbound in first person, which created some interesting plot architecture problems because there were some scenes where the heroine is unconscious or completely off stage and some important plot things happen. So I had to figure out ways of kind of getting around that, and it all worked out. But yeah, definitely, if it's something like that, definitely know which viewpoint you have to be using before you create your story, because it can really make a huge difference.
And we did hear from Joe Blendo. What advice can you offer a first-time fiction writer on finding a small press? Anybody?
Well, for finding a small press, I would just say do your research, Google, reach out to other authors who are already signed with the small press to see, how their experience is with that publishing house. I don't know, Google. That's how I found mine. And yeah, just social media can be helpful in that aspect as well.
Writer beware can be helpful. Another thing is make sure that you talk to authors who have been with the press for a while, because people who are newly published by press are always, there's going to be a honeymoon period where people are always going to be excited about what's happening. But 3, 4, 5 years out, they'll have a much more balanced, nuanced view of the publisher at that point. So I would definitely talk to people who've had some time with the press, so that they can give you a fairer assessment.
There are also a couple of services that collate different presses and literary journals. One of them is called the Submissions Grinder, and that's free. It's heavily geared towards speculative fiction. There's another one called Duotrope. That one is a paid service, but it's got a little broader base in terms of different genres, different sizes of presses, things like that.
Great. Days are gone when you could just pick up a writer's market and go from there, right? Okay, Jenny also would like to know, what are your favorite books or authors? Karin.
My favorite YA series is the Caraval series by Stephanie Garber. And I actually received a really great piece of advice after I wrote the first draft for the King's 100, which was go back to your favorite book and pick apart why you love that book so much. And that's really what helped me to make my manuscript into something that went from lengthy, didn't make sense, had some plot holes here and there, to publishable.
Dan?
This is such an unfair question because it just depends on what day you ask me.
Right.
Lately I've had Umberto Eco's Island of the Day Before stuck in my head, and I keep revisiting some of the scenes and kind of thinking about the way that he structured stories. And he did all kinds of amazing stuff, and he was a phenomenal author. And a short story writer that I always go back to is Jorge Luis Borges, who is brilliant use of language, and a kind of this amazing sense of magical realism, and labyrinths and mazes and libraries and alternate worlds. And I can just talk about him for an hour just by myself. So fantastic.
Lucy?
A great short story collection I read recently, it's horror, is Velocities by Kathy Koja. Aside from that, authors that I really enjoy reading lately, Caitlin Kiernan has always been a favorite for short fiction and her novels, and Victor Laval. If you aspire to write weird fiction, The Ballad of Black Tom is a great novella. And past that, like Dan said, it's just there's so much out there. My to be read list and my Kindle is enormous at this point. So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there.
Absolutely. Please ask more questions if you would like to. Sort of to the almost. Karin, how much did you feel that the romance was important in your book? Did you want that to be like at the forefront, or was that something that was just sort of fell into place after you created the rest of the world?
Oh, I love the romance. That's why I read. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And actually, yeah, some of the feedback that I got from the first draft was there's not enough romance. And that just really struck me like, why am I doing this then? I need to amp up the romance. So yeah, the story is not just about her finding on the search for her mother, but it's also on the search for who Piper is. And, you know, this love story helps her to figure some of that out without ruining too much of the story.
I think you are successful. So Lucy, about Halloween season, you know, for some of us it's Halloween all year round, and I feel like maybe you might be one of those people. So can you tell us a little about how that came together?
I've been thinking for a long time about putting together a collection of stories that were, if not Halloween focused, then focused on that time of year, focused on autumn. And I kind of put the collection together, you know, with the idea of it's kind of like the equivalent of getting, you know, a bag full of Halloween candy. You know, all the stories are a little bit different. There's a couple of to what might be to some people strange additions. Like I did include a couple of Christmas stories in there because Christmas is forever impinging on Halloween season. Yeah. Like, you know, Halloween won't even have started yet, and you'll go to Target and see Christmas trees up, and you'll be like, what are you doing? Come on, it's not time yet. You know, have the decency to wait until after Thanksgiving, for Pete's sake, you know. The collections got horror in it, but in general, it's a more fun collection than my past couple have been, which have been pretty dark and serious. And so it's got more of my humor in it and things like that.
Yeah, I appreciated that quite a lot.
Very cool.
I do think you have a good vein of humor that runs through a lot of your work. And how hard is that I've heard that humor is really hard to get across. So is that just something that comes naturally to you, or do you really have to think about it?
I find that humor and horror have a lot in common in that they're deeply subjective, you know, so, you know, something that one person finds terrifying, another person's like, ho hum, that's so boring. So if you're writing a horror story, you need to layer in different kinds of horror, and the same thing with humor. So, you know, there's different types of humor that connect with different readers. So, you know, anytime I'm deliberately writing something humorous, I have to try to hit the humor at different levels, so that if one thing doesn't work for one reader, they will hopefully find something amusing elsewhere in the story. You know, there's intellectual humor, there's stuff at the level of fart jokes, there's bad puns, you know, there's all kinds of things to work with.
Right. And Dan, I would say the same about you. Even though there's a lot of you know, the noir things that are going on in your novel, there are parts of it that I think that are really funny, and I think a lot of it comes from maybe some of the interactions between Ajax and Carter, and so tell us a little bit about how you kind of developed that relationship. It's like a sort of, I don't want to trivialize it by saying buddy cop, but it has that feel. Go ahead.
I think you're definitely right. It does kind of have that feel. And for me, I'm a massive outliner in terms of when I prepare for the books. I really sit down and figure out what I'm doing and when, and I find that really helps me with murder mystery procedural, knowing who's where and all this sort of stuff. But I leave myself wide open for the interplay between the characters, and I discover a lot of that on the page. So it feels like a much more free-flowing kind of dialogue, and that's where I kind of run into that magic of, you know, the characters wouldn't say this or the characters wouldn't say that. And I love having characters who call each other out on call each other out when they're being ridiculous or stubborn or mule-headed or what have you. And that lets me kind of dive into the characters and gives the reader a chance to see things from both sides of an argument, which is kind of a magical thing that books let us do.
Okay, one question that I do have to ask that I actually almost forgot was, since we are here for the McConnell Art Center, and y'all do have some connections to Worthington, do you think that Columbus, Ohio, Worthington is a good place for writers has it been inspirational to you as a writer in any way? Any of it?
Loved it. And I actually wrote the majority of my book at the old Worthington Library. So that was really special for me when I got to go see a copy there. So yeah, Worthington is great. And the library system, I have kids, so prior to the pandemic, going in for story time, we love Miss Karin at the old Worthington Library. So we miss that. And I heard that story time's coming back outside, so that'll be really helpful for us. But yeah, just the resource for me having the old Worthington Library in my backyard has been so great.
For what it's worth, I had exactly the same reaction. Like, I loved seeing my book on a bookstore shelf, but when I saw it at a library, at the old Worthington Library, I actually got emotional and teared up because, I was a library rat growing up and I spent all my time in the library, and to see something with my name on it in that Mylar wrapper was like, oh, it was just magic. And, old Worthington has the Ohio Writers Room. And that's where I first found one of Lucy's stories. I found a novel and I started reading it and I said, this is great. And then I found out she was teaching a class and I went and took the class and I said, this person is brilliant. I want to read everything else she's read, or I want to read everything else she's written. And I was able to take more classes from her. So I got into the writing community kind of through Worthington and through the library system.
I love the old Worthington Library as well. And I've spent a fair bit of time at the Park Road site as well. I really like the Worthington Library system because they are so supportive of local authors. You would like to think that every library would be, but they all aren't. So I really like what the Worthington Library does for its patrons. And I think, to address the larger question, I think Worthington and the Columbus area is a great place to be a writer because we've got a lot of other writers here. It's got a great art scene that's come up. And, if you compare the cost of living between central Ohio and like New York City or something, I mean, we're much better. It's a much more affordable place to be a fiction writer here than a lot of other places.
Of course, we're here to talk all about Ohio, so everything you say, we agree with. If anybody has any final questions, please do go ahead and type them into the chat because we're getting towards the end here. And I know you all talked a little bit about upcoming projects, but is there anything else you'd like to tell us about what you're working on now? Or go ahead, Karin, you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm still actively writing my historical fiction, which is about the 1947 Roswell incident. And I'm taking it on an investigation route from a teenager's perspective who's just recently graduated from high school and works at a newspaper. So I've just really enjoyed reading up about that event and the history surrounding it. So if you ever want to talk UFOs and aliens with me, I'm your person.
Awesome. Dan?
That Roswell story sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does.
Like I said, I'm diving into a slightly different project to get a different feel, different characters, and really stretching out my muscles. And I still have a stack of plans for Carter and Ajax, and I'm looking forward to seeing where they go next. I love writing and reading, and I'm so happy every morning that I'm excited to walk down the hall and get started on the day's work.
As mentioned, my poetry collection, Exposed Nerves, will be out in the fall. I'm working on a variety of other short story projects, and I have some novel projects that I'm sitting on some pretty big news for, but I can't talk about it yet, which is bad. But keep an eye on my social media in the coming weeks because hopefully I'll be able to actually announce it very soon.
Oh, yay. That's exciting. We did get one more little question in here I think we have time for. Oh, it's David Weaver. He would like to know, what are you reading now? Go ahead, anybody.
Sure. So I just finished, again, part of the research, which is a great book for anyone to read. It's called The Roswell, or Witness to Roswell, again with the aliens. But it's so interesting because it looks at all the different witnesses who were involved with the incident, ranging from, the daughter of the fire chief in town to some of the service people who were on base when it happened, and just getting their direct story was fascinating. It was a fascinating read for me.
Wow. Dan, want to go next?
Sure. I just finished reading a romance by an Ohio author, Maddie James, and I'm getting ready to switch gears and read Blacktop Wasteland, which is sitting in my to-be-read pile for a little bit. I'm looking forward to diving into that.
Nice. Lucy?
A lot of my reading time is taken up with doing developmental editing for private clients, and I kind of can't talk about that, but I've also started Lovecraft Country. I haven't gotten too far into it, but so far so good.
Yep. Are you one of those folks that won't watch the show until you read the book? Or you do the
mostly I don't have access to that particular channel right now, but I don't have too many qualms about watching a series before I read the book because there's always going to be differences.
Right. I agree. Well, we have one final comment from Cindy McLaren, which is thank you for the inspiration. So that's probably a good place to end on. I want to say thank you very much to all three of you for being on this panel with us. Thank you. Hopefully next year we can see each all in person. So if you all want to hold up your books for us, go ahead. That would be great. So Karin Biggs, author of The King's 100, Dan Stout, author of Titan Song, and Lucy Snyder, author of Halloween Season. And you can purchase all of those books online at www.bookloft.com. They're our official bookseller this year. There's a big poster right on the front page. Just go ahead and click right on that and buy their books. We would like to thank all of our sponsors and partners of the Ohioana Book Festival. And please check out www.ohioana.org for the entire weekend schedule. We have a fun kickoff event on Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. If anybody would like to attend that. You can also go to Eventbrite, which is linked on our website, to sign up for more live panels just like this one. Please come back this weekend. We are here Thursday through Sunday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. all day. So please come and check out some more panels. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Courtney.